I dropped the bike. But not my bike, oh no, I dropped this bike. The Suzuki SV650 Exter Press Test Bike. Now, this is how it went down. Shortly after filming this little acceleration sequence, my husband said, "Hey, you should come around, we should do that one again." And I said, "Alright, let me just make a U-turn down there." And as I was making the U-turn, I put my foot down and I fell. Now, I've managed to heroically hold the bike until the very end and kind of lay it gently on the ground so nothing would break, and the damages really were minimal, but it still hurts my ego very much talking about this. So, instead of curling into a ball and crying in the corner, I have decided to turn it into a teachable moment so that you guys can benefit once again from my mistakes. So, without further drama, let's get to the 7 tips that will help you avoid dropping your bike. Alright, so tip number 1 is that you should always plan where are you going to stop and where are you going to put your foot down. You should analyze the terrain and kind of plan your stops strategically, because you can find that where you're going to stop maybe has a little slope, and then you should always put the uphill foot down and not the downhill foot, because you will lose your balance and topple over. Another thing is that you should look for any potholes or uneven terrain, because your foot can go into the hole and you will not have the reach you're expecting. Also, you should be aware that if there are bumps on the road, you should not stop in a way that your wheels are on higher ground and where you're going to put your foot down is in kind of a valley. In that case, you will also not have the reach that you're expecting and you can fall down. Also, one more thing that you should inspect is if there is any debris or gravel where you're planning to stop. Never put your foot on some loose gravel, it can slide away really quickly, it happened to me. So yeah, gravel and debris is another thing you should watch out for. Tip number 2. Master the elusive sliding butt cheek technique. Now, the sliding butt cheek technique is all about sliding your butt on the seat halfway in order to gain better footing with one foot instead of tippy-toeing on 2 feet. I think that it's better to have solid footing, at least with one foot, and not kind of wobbly tippy toes with both of your feet. If you're as short as myself, it's not realistic to expect that you would find a bike where you can lay both feet flat on the ground on both sides. It will eliminate just too many models of bikes from your repertoire if you're only limited to those where you can lay your feet flat on the ground. Now, I haven't had a bike where I could lay my feet flat on the ground on both sides, I think ever. Maybe I could do it on the Gong. So, master the sliding butt cheek technique, it will help you a lot and you will gain steadier footing with one foot instead of tippy-toeing and wobbling around. Tip number 3. Always wear appropriate motorcycle footwear. Now, this is really important not only because of the protection that it offers, but also because of the support that it gives you. Now, take this boot for example. It's a normal non-motorcycle boot, and if I put my foot on the ground, I don't have much support at all. So if I'm tippy-toeing, the boot will just bend and I will lose my footing. Now, if you use a motorcycle boot or shoe, these have really good and rigid support. So when you put your foot down, you will have the needed support to give you that little bit of extra stability that you need to avoid falling down, like a ballerina. Tip number 4. You should know your bike's limitations and characteristics. Tip number 4. You should know your bike's limitations and characteristics. Some stuff like whether your bike has clip-ons or upright handlebar, the riding position, how grippy is the seat, the position of the foot pegs, or any other bits that can interfere with your feet reaching the ground. Now, if your bike has clip-ons, your sitting position is going to be bent more forward, so it will limit your reach a little bit with your feet. Moreover, if you have clip-ons, maybe you have a narrower steering angle because they need to put stoppers in order to avoid the clip-ons hitting the tank. So take all of these things into consideration. If the seat is very grippy, it will be harder to make the sliding butt cheek technique. So you have to take all of these things into consideration and really know your bike in order to avoid unpleasant surprises. Tip number 5. Learn to move the bike while standing beside it. So this is a really essential skill, not only because in some situations it's really difficult to push the bike backwards when you're tippy-toeing. It's also really useful if there is some weird terrain situation or sloping road. You have to be able to dismount and move the bike when you're standing beside it. It's important that you're able to make the correct judgment and put the side stand down, dismount, and finish the maneuver while standing beside the bike. It will save you a lot of trouble and probably some falls as well. Tip number 6. Accept that if you are vertically challenged, such as myself, or if you're even a normal-sized person and you're riding a taller bike, you're probably going to be laying it down more often than you'd like to. It's just a part of riding motorcycles, and these kinds of falls really don't cause a lot of damage. If at all possible, you can use some frame or engine protectors if you have an adventure bike, frame sliders if you have a sports bike, and maybe keep a set of backup clutch and brake levers if you're really prone to falling down. And final tip number 7. Choose a bike that will make your life easier on the daily. Now, from my experience, it's better to have a taller, narrower and lighter bike than a shorter, wider and heavier bike. I see many girls and shorter guys picking kind of a cruiser style custom motorcycles because they're really low, but I just wanted to say that having a lighter and narrower tall bike is a lot better for you because you get to practice your skill with a lighter motorcycle. If you constrain yourself to just lower bikes, you will never grow out of the fear of not having both feet soundly flat on the ground. So some things that you should look for when picking a bike if you're a shorter rider is the area where the seat attaches to the tank. It should be as narrow as possible because it will help you straighten your leg down and have better reach with your foot. Also, some bikes that have clip-ons, if you're riding them on the road, it can be a problem because you're leaned farther forward and it limits your reach with the legs. Keep that in mind if you want to pick a bike for road use. At the track it's less important because you're only starting and stopping in the pit lane and it's really not a problem. Final thing, if you've been following me on Instagram, which you should by the way, you'll know that I've been riding taller and heavier bikes than what you'd expect. Now, this is not a problem, but please make sure that if you have the skills to handle these kinds of big and heavy bikes, make sure that you're able to lift them up if you fall. Now, some things like engine protectors will make it easier because you can roll the bike over onto them and then the final lift is not that big. But make sure that if you travel alone, the bike that you're riding is light enough for you to pick up on your own. So after these 7 tips, you should be able to avoid dropping your bike. Now, of course, I knew these things before I dropped the bike this week. So what gives? What did I do wrong? Right, so the first thing that I did wrong is that I ignored that the SV650 Exter has clip-ons. Now, that means that its steering angle is slightly smaller than a normal handlebar bike. So I have attempted to do a really tight U-turn with the clip-ons in one go. That's a no-no. The second thing is that I ignored that the road was slightly sloped and I put my foot down at the downhill side. That's on me. The third thing that I did wrong is that I didn't wear motorcycle boots. I wore normal boots that didn't offer enough support in order to help me regain my footing as I lost my balance. But by far my biggest mistake was that I got overconfident and sloppy with my technique, something that us short riders simply cannot afford. Yeah, you should never underestimate your capability to fall down. Even if you're an experienced track rider or maybe you're riding around on big adventure bikes, you should never ever think that you're immune to gravity. Alright guys, that's it for me today. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this one and that these tips will be useful for you or the short rider in your life. If you have an interesting story about a fall, please share with me in the comments below. I would like to hear that. And hit subscribe so we can see each other again. And until next time, ride safe!